With all of that being said, this cannot continue. There will be either peace or there will be tragedy for Iran far greater than we have witnessed over the last 8 days.
A major flashpoint is unfolding in the Gulf.
Iran is reportedly threatening to close the Strait of Hormuz. Now, that is a vital oil shipping route after the U.S. bombed 3 of its key nuclear sites.
Well, the Strait of Hormuz is a narrow waterway between Iran and Oman. At its narrowest, the maritime passage is just 33 kilometers wide, yet it handles roughly 21 million barrels of oil per day, or 21% of global oil trade. Now, it also transports 1/3 of the world's liquefied natural gas.
Now, even a partial closure can disrupt global supplies and send prices soaring. The strait is critical for energy exports from Saudi Arabia, UAE, Iraq, and others.
Now, for India, 2 million barrels of daily oil import passes through here. But India's Minister of Petroleum and Natural Gas, Hardeep Singh Puri, has said that India has enough diversified resources to absorb the shock. Energy markets are already reacting, with analysts warning that oil could jump to $80 a barrel.
The government under the Honorable Prime Minister has been consistently and periodically reviewing the situation, including the possibility of the closure of the Straits of Hormuz.
Now, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has called Iran's threat economic suicide, warning Tehran against taking what he called another terrible mistake. And tensions are high, and the world is watching the Strait of Hormuz closely.
And as we know, this is a major flashpoint in the unfolding conflict in the Gulf, where we have Iran, which is reportedly threatening to now close the Strait of Hormuz. Now, it's a major development as it's a vital oil shipping route. And this is after the U.S. bombed 3 of its key nuclear sites, which include Fordo, Isfahan, and Natanz.
Now, the Strait of Hormuz is a narrow waterway, which is between Iran and Oman, and it is the narrowest. The maritime passage is just 33 kilometers wide, yet it handles roughly 21 million barrels of oil per day. Now, that is about 21% of global oil trade, and it also transports 1/3 of the world's liquefied natural gas.
Right, and it's important to note here that even a partial closure could disrupt global supplies and send prices soaring. The strait is critical for energy exports from Saudi Arabia, UAE, Iraq, and others.
Now, interestingly for India, the 2 million barrels of daily oil imports pass through here, but India's Minister of Petroleum and Natural Gas, Hardeep Singh Puri, has stated that India has enough diversified sources to absorb the shock. And, well, somehow energy markets are still already reacting, with analysts who are warning oil can jump to $80 a barrel.
And that being said, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has called Iran's threat an economic suicide, warning that Tehran, if it chooses to go in that direction, it could be taking what he called making another terrible mistake.
Now, for more on this, we're now being joined by John Rossando, who is joining us live from Washington, D.C. He is a security analyst and a geostrategist. Thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast. All right, let's get into the story that we have been talking about just now. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has called on China to encourage Iran not to shut down the Strait of Hormuz. He's also added that a move to close the strait would be a massive escalation that would merit a response from U.S. and others. I'm interested to know, who are these other parties that involved that Marco Rubio is talking about?
Well, you're talking about the countries like the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait that border the Persian Gulf. If Iran were to shut off the Strait of Hormuz, it could also have a severe economic impact on China that's heavily dependent on Iranian oil for its economic vitality.
Right. So, and we know that while the White House insists that the attacks were not about regime change, Trump is openly questioning why regime change wouldn't be on the table. And he said in a social media post, and I'm quoting him here, that if the current Iranian regime is unable to make Iran great again, then why wouldn't there be a regime change? Now, we know that the officials and his administration has already said that that is not the case. Now, how do you interpret these mixed signals that we're getting from the Trump administration at the given point?
I think that what President Trump is saying, in contrast with maybe the Bush and Obama administrations that used American military power to topple governments, that the United States military is not going to be used to end the rule of the mullahs in Tehran. You've had ongoing protests against the mullahs for the past almost 10 years. I could foresee things such as President Trump helping the Iranian people to remain connected to the internet so that they can take matters into their own hands, or maybe the Israelis taking out the besieged militias that murder and oppress the Iranian people when they rise up. So I think that President Trump is, saying that it's up to the Iranian people, but I could conceive some sort of covert operation or something like that.
Right, and that being said, I'm curious to know, if at all they topple the regime, do we still guarantee that Iran, after the U.S. strikes, would not want to go back to developing its nuclear ambition? Will the new generation, perhaps the new government, would want to not want to go back to it?
Well, let's put it this way. For the past several years, the people of Iran have been demonstrating in favor of restoring the monarchy. And Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi has been the most important and most popular opposition figure, and he's been reportedly approached by China, America, and other nations about the possibility of forming a government in the event the regime falls.
Right, so we know that Iran's foreign minister is in Moscow right now and is trying to seek what he calls a serious and closer consultation with Putin, now saying that Russia and Iran have common enemies and shared threats. Now, do you see this as a sign of a deepening strategic axis between Tehran and Moscow? And now, having said that, could this shift the balance of power in the region at all?
Well, let's put it this way. There's already a very deep, ingrained connection between Moscow and Tehran. I mean, in the Ukrainian war, the Iranian Shahed drones have been used by the Russians against the Ukrainians. I mean, you have basically an axis of Iran, Russia, and China all working together. That I don't see anything else, but I think that if the people of Iran are able to rise up and able to take down this regime, it would be a real blow to both Moscow and Beijing.
Right, and I also want to get to the U.S. strikes. Now, we've been talking to a lot of experts, and there's a really interesting point that some of the experts have picked up. They say that they might have damaged the facilities, but then they haven't damaged knowledge, which is something that even Iranian FM has talked about. The knowledge has not been damaged. There are scientists who still want to work for it. So do you think, how successful do you think these strikes have been, especially getting U.S. involved in the whole conflict? How successful do you think this has been?
Well, I think that President Trump wants to keep a small footprint for the United States in Iran. I mean, and the Israelis have been going after every Iranian scientist of any repute to keep them from working with this regime.
Right, and that being said, we also know that US's involvement has triggered a lot of unrest back home, where a lot of Washingtons are not convinced with Donald Trump's justification of being complicit in the Israeli war, which is serving more of Israel's interests than America's. And with 40,000 troops still in the region, there's a lot at stake. Now, how do you think, is Trump going to justify this claim, or do you think he has already done it perhaps in a limited aspect in his address, or are we going to see more details emerging in the military briefing that's going to happen very soon? What's your assessment there?
Well, let's put it this way. There are a lot of Americans who are scared about, it will be another Iraq, another Libya, another Syria. Americans don't really understand the outside world. They don't understand that Iranian intelligence and Iranian assets were why Iraq turned out the way it turned out. They don't also understand that there's a widespread move inside Iran against the regime. President Trump can justify this based on the fact that Iran has been the #1 antagonist of the United States since 1979. It's basically been in a state of war with us, and there's no doubt that if Iran had a nuclear weapon, it would engage in extortion against us and against our allies.
Right, and that being said, I also want to bring in the whole point of diplomacy. Apparently, according to the Iranian foreign minister, they say that there might not be a chance for diplomacy right now. Somehow, Trump is also positive for that. He thinks that after the U.S. strikes, he can actually force Iran to come back to the table. We also have European leaders like the UK, France, and Germany trying to put them back on the table. Do you think that's a possibility as of now?
Well, I think diplomacy is dead. I mean, diplomacy's been dead for a while. I mean, last month you had Iran telling Arab leaders in the Gulf that they would not give up the enrichment program. That was President Trump's red line. And now that President Trump has struck, the Iranians are not interested in budging at all. They are talking about, maybe striking back at the U.S. somehow. That could possibly even include terror attacks on American soil.
But also, I really want to pick that up as well. You said that the red line was the uranium enrichment, but that was something that Iranians said, that we're not going to have nuclear weapons. That was the red line, and not uranium enrichment.
Well, let's put it this way. Why do you need to have centrifuges and uranium at 60% enrichment, 200 feet down? I mean, it's not like you need to have that for a civilian nuclear program. The only countries that have 60% or more enrichment are nuclear powers like the United States, India, France, Russia, or China.
And that being said, can there be any deal where there could be a deal which could limit uranium enrichment, or that deal is just done? Nobody really wants Iran to actually even develop uranium enrichment for civilian purposes, as they say.
Well, there's no reason to have civilian enrichment at this level. You don't need that for for electricity. You don't need that for civilian uses. The only reason that the IAEA said that you need this is for military purposes. And if anybody wants to argue with semantics, they don't either know the technology or they're lying.
Interesting. All right, well, thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast. We appreciate you coming and giving your insights.
Thank you.